everyone. So I wanted to talk about Nick Gordon. If you're not familiar with who he was the boyfriend or ex-boyfriend of Bobbi Kristina. Bobbi Kristina, of course, is the only child that Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown had. If you know anything about Whitney Houston, you know she was an amazingly talented woman, and she has inspired generations of singers and other artists. Unfortunately, she dealt with drug addiction for most of her adult life, and she lost the battle with her addiction and died due to a drug overdose. Now, Nick Gordon and Bobbi Kristina were raised as brother and sister because Whitney Houston adopted Nick when he was around 12 years old. After Whitney Houston's untimely death, Bobbi Kristina and Nick Gordon became romantically involved. Bobbi Kris's family was very concerned, as were the people managing Whitney Houston's estate, because there were allegations of physical abuse. And also, the people managing Whitney Houston's estate were worried that Nick Gordon was lying about being legally married to Bobbi Kristina to try to gain access to Whitney Houston's estate. And it was later found that they were not legally married. And one thing I will tell y'all, ladies, especially black women, a lot of you who come from these sort of hotep religions, be very careful about men who promote spiritual marriages, okay? Because let me tell you something. It was a guy in this area who was legally able to perform other people's wedding ceremonies, and he actually dated like 2 or 3 women, performed these spiritual marriage ceremonies, and then had these women thinking that he was married to them and like stole all this money from them. It was crazy. So I just want to say this for some of you who may not know. When you get a marriage license, right? Say you have someone perform the ceremony. They're legally authorized to perform the ceremony, and they fill out all the paperwork. And in many states, the document will say something like, you know, the marriage was performed or solemnized on, and then, you know, the person who performs the ceremony, they write the date that they performed the ceremony, their name. They may have to put the date on whatever document they have that legally authorizes them to perform marriage ceremonies. Then they sign and date that portion of the document, and then it has to be mailed back into, I believe in many states it's like a circuit court or the deputy clerk of court or the clerk of court, and the document will tell you that, okay, this document must be returned to the deputy clerk of court by, 5 days or a week after the date that the marriage ceremony was performed. So I just want to make sure, especially for my younger ladies, I want to make sure that you understand that if you go through a wedding ceremony, you have the marriage license is filled out. If that marriage license is not mailed in to the clerk of court, the deputy clerk of court, or whoever you are supposed to send that document to, if that document is not sent back in, you're not legally married. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that, Nick did something similar to that with Bobbi Kristina, but I'm just saying that you would be surprised at the number of people who walk around thinking that they're legally married and they're not actually married because they didn't turn the marriage license back in. And I actually think that something similar happened with Yandy and Mendices from Love and Hip Hop New York. I think she actually admitted that after they had their wedding ceremony, she never actually had the marriage license filed. She never turned it in, so they were not legally married, okay? But anywho, the people managing Whitney Houston's estate were very concerned that he was romantically involved with Bobbi Kris because they felt like he was using that along with pretending to be married to her to try to get access to the money. Well, over time, Bobbi, Chris, and Nick Gordon, their relationship doesn't work out. And then in 2015, Bobbi Chris dies under very suspicious circumstances because she died like in almost exactly the same way that her mother did. You know, she overdosed in a bathtub. And that's very suspicious. Now, in 2016, Nick Gordon was found liable for Bobbi Chris's death in a civil case. Now, some people say that it was a default judgment because he missed a lot of the court deadlines. But he was being accused of giving her the drink that ultimately killed her. Because, I mean, there was like a lethal combination of drugs and alcohol in her body at the time that they did the autopsy. And at the time of Bobbi Kristina's death, a lot of people were side-eyeing Nick Gordon. They were wondering, like, you know, you had access to both of these women, and these women died pretty much in the exact same way. Were you involved? But, you know, there was never a criminal case, so that never went anywhere, okay? And so now, yesterday, he himself died of a drug overdose. And so it's going to be very interesting to see the circumstances surrounding his death. You know, there are some people who feel like his death is karmic retribution because a lot of people do believe that he was involved in both Whitney and Bobbi Chris's deaths. And then you have some people wondering if there's someone else in that circle who is going around trying to off everyone who would potentially have a claim to Whitney Houston's estate, because after her mom passes away, I'm not really sure where the money's going to go from there. Gordon was her legally adopted son, I believe, but I think that most of the money now is being funneled to Whitney's mom, and she is an older lady. And so it is very suspicious that a lot of the people closest to Whitney Houston are all dying due to a drug overdose. Now, is it possible that this is some sort of a representation of a dysfunctional cycle, a pattern of drug addiction or drug abuse? Certainly. But I don't believe in coincidences. And it's very strange that Whitney Houston and both of her children, her daughter, Bobbi Chris, and her adopted son, Nick Gordon, all died of a drug or overdose. So let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you think this is a coincidence? Do you think it's possible that Nick Gordon was involved in their deaths and so he died in the same way that he killed them? Or do you think that maybe there is someone in that orbit that's often everyone that was around Whitney Houston to try to make sure that they're the ones left with the money at the end of the day? Let me know what you think. I'll talk to you soon.